Welcome to this plumberparts.co.uk video. On today's video I'm going to give you a bit of information about water softeners, how they work, why they work, and also why they're probably the best way to get rid of hard water in your area and beat all those inline scale reducers and electric wires that run around pipes, because they're all useless. The only thing that's ever going to do it is a water softener. So what we've got here is a little outdoor water softener that's in its own little insulated case. Just look at the small components first of a water softener, and then we'll go back to the office to give you a little bit of a drawing about how they actually work. Here is the main crank valve. This here is the discharge outlet. So when it regenerates and it needs to discharge water that's regenerated, it comes out of here and goes off to the drain. Now here are your two isolating valves, your flow and return. Here is your hard water in, and there's your soft water out. And in here we have the brine chamber. This is where you put all your salt to create brine to wash out the resin chamber during regeneration. Let's think about the other alternatives there are to a water softener first and find out really why they don't work very well. First, you have those magnetic scale reducers that have the wire that wraps round and round and round and round around the pipe. You often see them on the inlet to a combi boiler. Now, they don't work very well because they don't get rid of flush out of the calcium and magnesium, which is what is in hard water. All they do is break it down so it tries to flow out of whatever outlets you're using, like your taps or your washing machine and stuff like that, and still gives you dry skin after a shower and doesn't really help your washing, and also it still does get stuck in components. That's the same for the small tubular ones you have that have got like the springs wrapped around inside to create like a kind of filter effect. Right, so let's have a look at why a water softener is the best way to remove sodium and calcium ions from the water. So we have our cold water in, our hard water in. Now in a water softener we have our resin chamber, which has got loads of small beads that have sodium ions on them. Now the hard water passes in through all these beads. Now what happens here, the process that happens is the calcium and magnesium ions swap places with the sodium ions. Now the water leaves and goes off to your taps as soft, and that will just be sodium ions in there, okay? Now after a while these beads will get all clogged up with magnesium and calcium ions. That's when it needs to regenerate. Now a water softener knows when it needs to regenerate because it has a small computer on it. It'll analyse when you're using water and therefore do it at like 2 in the morning when you're all asleep. Or you can actually set a time for it to do it, and that will usually be roughly the same time if you know what you're doing. When this needs to regenerate and all these small beads have filled up with calcium and magnesium ions, we have a separate chamber full of salt. Now this is the brine chamber. What happens is brine is flushed through the resin chamber and cleans all that out, and then is flushed out to a drain, and that means then that the resin chamber is then regenerated. And that's basically what that crank valve does at the top. Is at the certain times when it's required, it will move round, allow water out of the brine chamber to regenerate this, then force it out through the drain, and then go back to its previous standard working procedure, which is hard water in, going through your resin chamber, and then going out as soft. So a water softener removes the magnesium and calcium ions and flushes them away, whereas any other product that isn't a water softener doesn't do that. That's why they're so much better. Now there's a few problems you can sometimes have. Sometimes the valve assembly doesn't work because all this is controlled by a large crank valve. You either have one that's controlled, all the different parts of the valve are opened up by a disc that's on a small motor that moves round slowly and opens and closes different parts of the valve at certain times. They're really, really simple things. You know, the way they work really is just by timing this valve to allow water to be directed through the different components of the water softener. Yeah, so that's why you have salt in there for two reasons: to rinse out the resin chamber when it's full of calcium and magnesium so it can regenerate, and also to allow to recharge those beads with sodium. There is one thing to consider when installing a water softener in a house, is that you do have to have one unsoftened outlet. So you have to have one hard water outlet. So that means you tee off to the cold tap in the kitchen before you go into the water softener and soften that load of water, okay? The reason for that is generally most people don't really like drinking softened water. It doesn't really taste that nice, and also it's not thought best practice that you actually have drinking water go through a brine chamber like it does, or a resin chamber like it does. Not because it's dangerous or anything, it just doesn't taste very nice. It's horrible. So yeah, most people have a hard water outlet before it gets to the water softener. So I'm going to show you guys how these little babies work. Now the reason I'm doing this is because the brine chamber keeps filling up because this figure of 8 valve keeps letting by. So what we're going to do, we're going to change these valves in here and fix this all right now. As our crank moves round, and opens and closes all these little slots on the motor that's on the top. It slowly moves the crank round. It opens and closes all these different holes to go to the different parts of the water softener or to the system. So when it's in a normal operating mode, it will go in through the resin chamber, get softened, and then go out through to off to your house. So here we have our brine chamber now with nice pellets of salt in there to create the brine that's going to wash out the resin chamber when it regenerates. So we've got the valve on top here. If we have a look on this, if we press this button here, recharge tonight, see if we can force a recharge. There we go, it's recharging now. So this valve will start to move round and allow that disc to move round and allow water into the relevant areas of the water softener at the relevant time so it recharges properly. I hope you've all found this plumberparts.co.uk video informative. If you think we've missed anything out or you want any more help on water softeners or anything, either comment on this video, go to our website at www.plumberparts.co.uk or subscribe to these videos, okay? Because there's loads more always coming out and they're always great, and you know, we do our best. See you soon, guys. Hold tight. plumberparts.co.uk. Honest reviews and advice.